We're on an adventure. We began our journey with this book, with Robert Brumet's book, Birthing a Greater Reality, A Guide to Conscious Evolution. So, yeah, I mean, some of the, where we started last week, we began discussing how, one of the most miraculous evolutionary factors is the human brain. Well, we talked about how if we're just using the brain, if we're just using our mind, we can create a lot of things that can hurt a lot of people because we're leaving out that second part, the biggest part really, the other miracle, which is our human heart. So when we combine the human heart with the human brain, we can create amazing things that heal, that love, that help to shift our globe into its next phase of evolution. So that's kind of what we're about here. We had a great discussion in our book study group on Thursday, and we talked about all kinds of great things. It was fascinating. So I want to let you know that it's not too late to join a book study group. And highly recommend, because it's really a great way to just absorb this material into your cells and maybe allow it to create a shift in you. All right. So today our focus is on chapter 2, which is, he shares in there about the scientists and the philosophers and the visionaries who have come up with various theories of conscious evolution. And the chapter is a little heady, so it's good for reading. But for a talk, I want to focus, I think, on the larger picture, which is really the whole purpose of this, is to understand ourselves, to understand others, to understand where we may be headed, and then with that understanding, see the choices that are before us. And see how we can participate in birthing that greater reality. So all of these various theories of conscious evolution have a common theme. They are different ways of looking, different lenses through which to view the world and human progression, but they do have a common thread. And so as we talked about last week, Homo sapiens, we've been evolving over the eons, but around 100,000 years ago, we kind of stopped developing physically so much. And we shifted from a biological evolution to an evolution of consciousness, right? And to really understand conscious evolution, we need to let go of the idea that it's a ground-up experience. In other words, that we are guided solely by environmental forces. And really consider that we are pulled from above, as Robert Brumet says in the book. We're pulled from above. In other words, that we are all drawn to a higher purpose. So he says about that, from this perspective, the purpose of evolution is for the absolute to unfold itself within the relative universe. Now, just defining absolute for those of you who may be new, the absolute is that unformed, universal, divine essence, consciousness, right? And then the relative is our physical here and now experience. So another way to say this is that we're growing and evolving our awareness that we are divine beings, expressing in this physical realm. So he also talks about this thing he calls involution. Involution, not evolution, involution, which is briefly the metaphorical descent of spirit into physical expression. So soul, mind, body, and then dense physical matter. in this, he calls this the great chain of being. The great chain of being, that all of creation is infused with its creator. And he says the physical universe is simply a camouflage for the absolute. Take that in for a second. Breathe that in. The physical universe is simply a camouflage for the absolute. So spirit loses itself in its creation so that it can find itself again and discover new dimensions of its being as it goes. This is a process of awakening, the process of birthing into the next level of awareness until we reach the ultimate, which is oneness. So it's kind of like the story of the prodigal son when you think about it. The prodigal son leaves the love of the father, takes his inheritance, and goes and has an adventure, has an experience, right? And then he gets consumed by the experience, loses his inheritance, and then goes back to the father, tail between the legs, very humbled. And the father, much to the dismay of the brother, welcomes him with open arms, with love and joy. And the fatted calf plays a major role in the story. The fatted calf, I guess, being this symbolic of all of the good, the abundance that I have is yours. So we are like the prodigal sons and daughters that have gone off to have an experience, right? Have an adventure. And we're exhausted. And we are headed back home, welcomed by love, by warmth, by joy, and by abundance of good. Right? And so the visionary that I want to talk about that stands out for me in this chapter is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I'm working on my français. How'd they do? He's French. Right? And a visionary. Yeah, there he is, right there. And he became a Jesuit priest in 1912, brilliant guy. Then he went on to get a degree in geology and paleontology, and he was serving in China and was part of the team that made the discovery of the Peking man, which was a big deal back then. It kind of shook up our understanding of human evolution. And so he then brought together, kind of synthesized all of these disciplines after a while and developed his idea, his theory of conscious evolution, which the Catholic Church immediately called heresy. Refused to publish any of his writings, right? And whenever the Catholic Church, because I'm like, oh, really? Who's the heretic? What are they saying? I'm really interested, much more interested than what you have to say. Right? So his theory is that there's two basic kinds of energy. An external energy, which he calls tangential, and then an internal energy, which he calls radial. And he equates that radial energy with love. With love. And he says, love alone is capable of uniting living beings in such a way as to complete and fulfill them. For it alone takes them and joins them by what is deepest in themselves. Love alone. what is deepest in themselves. He also talks about different spheres of being. Okay, so we know like the biosphere is living organisms, beings, different, in the earth and around the earth. Well, he talks about a sphere that is similar, but this one is composed of thought energy. A sphere of thought energy that surrounds the earth. And he calls this the noosphere. The noosphere. That he really believed was a living organism of collective human thought, which sounds a little bit like the collective consciousness that we talk about here, right? And it's interesting that Carl Jung, they were contemporaries. I don't know if they, got together, but it's interesting. Who influences who? So Desjardins also believed that evolution is directing us to a superior form of existence, but only if we're drawn together by this radial energy, in other words, by love. And then we move together towards the omega point. Have you heard that term, the omega point? That's Desjardins' term. The omega point is really where all of us have awakened to the truth of who we are, to our divine identity. And we're connecting with each other in love and oneness. Oh, doesn't that sound good? I want to go there. Take me to the omega point. Where is it? Right? And you wonder if he were alive today, what would he think? What would he think? Like, oh, I was mistaken. Or maybe I didn't realize how long it would take for people to connect with this radial energy of love, to realize who they are, to connect with each other, to realize their oneness. Didn't realize how long it would take. But sometimes that is the process of awakening, right? It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 1 step forward, 2 steps back, it seems like. Or maybe we come to a critical point. There's something that's so off that it's the impetus we need to do the work to change, to grow, to evolve, and take that next quantum leap into our next level of awareness. Maybe, right? Maybe. So most of these brilliant thinkers who have theorized about conscious evolution have a kind of a map of conscious stages. Stages, phases, levels. They're different, but they're all sort of maps with which we see the world, right? In which we see each other, which we see where we may be headed, right? They're different ways of looking at it, and it evolves over time. Think about your own life, your own views of the world. I'll bet you anything. It's different than maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, however, right? We evolve. Our thinking, or the way we look at life, evolves over time. And so it's not really the world that changes, it's our perception of the world that changes. And so Brumet says, what seemed to be in the world is within ourselves. The world is evolving because we are evolving. And so one of those maps of consciousness that I'd like for us to look at is spiral dynamics. Because spiral dynamics, there we go, spiral dynamics is being explored in Unity and in other conscious communities. And again, it's a way of understanding ourselves, understanding others, really understanding our capacity for growth. And it was originally conceived of by Claire Graves in the early 20th century, and then two people, Don Beck and Chris Cowan, refined it. They wrote a book called Spiral Dynamics that came out in 1996. Okay, so you can see in this slide that it is a spiral, right? It's a spiral. Different colors represent the different levels, or they tend to call it memes. So not an internet meme, but a meme as being a cultural shift, something that shifts us culturally. And you can also look at, this is the kind of evolution of man. Like this bottom level here is kind of the early man, or the survival instinct. That's beige, and it goes up like that. So, but we don't really transcend these things. As Ken Wilber says, transcend and include. So we're taking the previous level, we're transcending and including, hopefully taking, each level has a positive aspect and a negative aspect. Hopefully taking the positive aspects from the previous level and then growing into higher levels. And also sometimes we can be at, and I'll show you in just a minute, we'll go through all the different levels. You can be at one level, and then suddenly when something happens and you're really stressed, you kind of regress to a previous level. Or sometimes you need a quality from a different level, either a previous one or a higher one, and you can grab it. And sometimes you are really straddling 2 or 3 of these different levels. So as we go through this, look at where you might be most of the time, the majority of the time, where you might find yourself. And it could be, well, I'm sort of this and this. Yeah, you can be like 2 or 3 levels at the same time. You can also think about people you know and what level or meme they are living, right? All right, so let's look at that first one, which is beige. Yeah, okay. That is, basic survival. This is early humans. They're focused on food, right? Food, shelter, reproduction, and how to survive in extreme conditions. Now, the modern example, each of these are going to have modern examples. Homeless populations, right? Victims of war, victims of a natural disaster. You think, like in Western North Carolina when the hurricane hit, you're thinking you are back down into basic survival mode, right? You need those skills. All right, let's move to the next one, which is purple. This is more of a tribal consciousness. And you think about the development of early humans. We come together in tribes. And there's a sense of belonging there. There's a respect for elders. Often we see the world as controlled by spirits, metaphysical, mystical forces. And we think of people following rituals for protection, like human sacrifices people did. They did those sorts of rituals that they believed would keep them safe and keep their crops growing. So modern examples of this could be religious fundamentalists, superstitious beliefs, corporate cultures that emphasize tradition over innovation. Now, again, as I said, each one has a negative and a positive aspect. So a positive aspect of this could be, when we think about an omen is not such a bad thing. Maybe we're seeing something that it's not in the physical. Maybe a talisman that we hold or something that we understand has some power for us helps us develop our spirituality, helps develop more of our wholeness. So that could be a positive thing that we bring up, that we include as we move forward. Okay, so the red here, we'll go into red, this is ego, power, domination, personal power, conquest. The mindset is might makes right, driven by immediate gratification, dominance. And the behavior is aggressive. Heroism is another behavior here, seeking power. So modern examples, street gangs, autocratic leaders, warlords, action hero archetypes. It's interesting that action hero movies are really popular now. There must be some need that our culture has to incorporate some of this. You know, again, there's some positives. There can be positives in the negative. Maybe I need to find that powerful hero within myself, you know, and then we include that as we move up. All right, let's go to blue. This is order, authority, absolutism, purpose. This is about following rules and structures and morality, believes the mindset in a higher purpose, values obedience and duty, follows hierarchical systems, and adheres to doctrines, suppresses individual desire for the greater good. So you can think of a police force, the military, right? You're suppressing your individual desire for a greater good. Bureaucratic governments, legal systems, really people who like law and order, right? Okay, so let's move to the next one, which is orange. This is about achievement and success. And the core focus, personal success, materialism, competition. The mindset is scientific, goal-oriented. We're valuing progress and innovation. Our behavior here is strategic thinking. We seek efficiency and results. So we can think of entrepreneurs, corporate executives, the scientific community, right? So, and as we go through this, I want you to think of, you know, what else might fit in here that you can observe in our culture, right? All right, let's go to green. Now, the spiral dynamics is kind of divided into two tiers. This first tier has 7 of these levels, or 7 of the memes. And then the second tier, which is really higher consciousness, has 2, although some people theorize there's more than that. But this green is the highest level of the first tier. All right, so this is about social justice, right? Equality, sustainability, collaboration. We're valuing relationships, emotional intelligence, pluralism. People in the green often challenge hierarchical structures, right? Anybody here like that? Yeah. We seek consensus, avoid conflicts, prioritize group well-being over individual gain. So examples, social justice movements, environmental activism, therapy culture. Now that's the green. All right, so let's move on up to that second tier. And it's hard to read there because it's yellow. I put it in yellow. It should be outlined so you can see it. This is integrative, systematic. This is, people in yellow are fluid and they flow. They're flexible. This is systems thinking, adaptability, integrating different perspectives. Values knowledge and problem solving over ideology. The behavior here are people who, they navigate complexity with ease. They embrace paradox, right? They seek to optimize rather than control. So modern examples, holistic thinkers, polymaths, decentralized leadership, futurists, right? So again, you might see yourself straddling a couple of these levels. Anybody noticing that? Like, I'm here most of the time, but yeah, I got some of that. I know I got some of that too. All right, so let's look at the final one, which is turquoise. This is the highest that we know right now. Interconnectedness. This is higher consciousness, deep spirituality, interconnected, transcending individualism and collectivism, transcending both of those. You see the world as an interconnected whole. The behavior is focusing on global well-being, cosmic consciousness, higher states of consciousness. We're all about looking for higher states of consciousness. So these are mystics, advanced spiritual leaders, global think tanks, deep ecologists. Okay, thank you, team back there, for getting that spot on. I appreciate it. It helps, right? It helps to see this stuff rather than just hearing me talk. It just makes a little deeper impression. Okay, so is this making sense? Is it feeling like, oh yeah, that might be a way that I can understand myself, I can understand other people, I can understand different cultures, right, around the world and where they are? It's a really useful tool. So I invite you this week to sort of let that come in. Let the idea come in of this, wow, what is the next level of my evolution? How can I participate and open to growing into that higher dimension, in that higher level? And how can I help bring all of us along for the ride, right? How can we all participate together? Because that's what it's about. It's very much tied in with global transformation, our own personal healing. Okay, namaste. Hi, it's Reverend Victoria here. I'm at Unity Center of Peace with our house band, Bright Matter.
Hello.
Yeah, and if this video has inspired you or empowered you or opened your heart, opened your consciousness, or even just given you hope, we ask that you support what we're doing here by making a donation today, going to unitychapelhill.org or clicking the link below. And we thank you.
Thank
Thank you.